I want to welcome you to the national launch of the 2022 Sub-National Budget Transparency Survey reports, holding here at the Abuja Continental Hotel, formerly Abuja Sheraton. Our theme for this year's presentation is Trends in Public Finance Management at the Sub-National Level. I want to welcome every one of us who has come in from far, and like the cliche will say, from wide, to come and join us in this lunch. I know a lot of you came in here before 10. Some of you came in as early as 9 a.m. and want to appreciate you. But we'll be going ahead to start now with opening prayer, and we'll be doing the national prayer. For those of us who don't know the national prayer is the second stanza of the national anthem. And because I don't want to goof, even though I know most parts of it, I will tell you to help me. Please, may we stand up. One, two, three, go. O God of creation, direct our noble path. Guide our members to the truth. Grip our youths the truth to know. To love and honesty to grow. To be just and true. To build a nation where peace and justice shall reign. Amen. You may sit down. And I congratulate those who mumbled it like me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this year. We do this every 2 years. But we were actually supposed to have done this last year, considering the fact that the last one, or 2 years ago actually, the last one was in 2018. 2020, yes. So the last one should have been last year. We'd have done this last year. But we decided to respect ourselves because COVID invaded us. And we needed to fight a greater battle. My name is Emmanuel Imewore Ohiomohai. I will be your host for today. And so I want to first welcome all those on the high table and welcome those who are not yet on the high table. First, I would like to invite onto the high table the Permanent Secretary, Directorate of Budget and Economic Planning, Jigawa State, Aminu Adamu Ringim. I want to welcome Chris Okeleke, who is the governance team lead of FCDO. Please, a round of applause for him. We also want to welcome the Executive Director, Center for Social Justice, St. George, Abuja, who is also going to be making a presentation and leading or moderating a session. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the ever vivacious Eze Onyekpere. The immediate past Chief of Staff to the Deputy Senate President, former Deputy Senate President, and governorship candidate in Delta State. Ladies and gentlemen, the founding executive director of Center LSD, Mr. Otive Ibuzo. Ladies and gentlemen, we also want to recognize the following people. Oni Adekunle Abiodun, who is Director of Budget, Ministry of Budget and National Planning, Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning of your state. Please could you stand up for recognition? The Director, Katsina State Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, Saminu Mohammed. A round of applause for him. Director of Budget, Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning and Statistics in Owerri, Imo State, Ojiaka Obinna. From PEL, that's Federal Partnership Facilitators, Partnership to Engage, Reform and Learn, Stephanus Akau. Thank you. From Bayelsa State, the Director of the State Budget Office, Primabere Soro. I hope I called it well. I tried, isn't it? Thank you very much. The Director of Budget from my own state, Edo State, Ose Michael. From Abia State, the Director of Budget, Oji Eme Kalu. Thank you. And from Rivers State, Director of Budget, Linus Nna Amadi. From Cross River State, the Permanent Secretary at the Budget Office, Aqua Oko Bassa. Thank you very much. And from Osun State is Director Economic Planning, Bukola Additional. Still from Osun State, Director Budget, Olushola Popola. From Taraba State, Danjuma I Sogulu. Did I call it well? What is it? Seigulu. Okay, Seigulu. I tried. It was close. From Adamawa State, the Permanent Secretary, Budget, Ministry of Finance and Budget, Wumfe Brina Anthony. And from Delta State, the Assistant Director of Budget, Emeka Okonkwo. From Enugu State, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Budget and Planning, Eze Clara. Thank you very much for coming. And representing the Country Director of Action Aid, NLB, we have Adewale Adeduton, the Social Mobilization Manager. The person who wrote this thing has a very beautiful handwriting, so I don't really recognize beautiful handwritings. Ladies and gentlemen, we move ahead as we expect more guests, but we have to start. We just can't keep waiting. You know, the truth about it is that this has been on for years, and for those of you who don't know, this is one of the pillars of modern budgeting, where we look at transparency and looking at what exactly performance, transparency in information, transparency in so many things. I remember many years ago, in fact for many years, someone like Otive Ubuzo has been teaching us about budget cycle. We will have workshops organized by PEL where we will talk about budget cycle, talk about budget transparency. And with that, some of us got to understand the whole budget system. Of course, we know that this event is anchored by the Civil Resource Development and Documentation Center, which is a renowned non-governmental organization based in Nigeria. Now, the Sub-National Budget Survey is a project aimed at instilling transparency in budgeting and budget process across the 36 states of the Federation. It focuses on 4 key indicators: public availability of budget information, public participation in the budget process, the strength of the oversight institutions, and public availability of procurement information. This process is funded by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, and UK Aid. And this survey highlights the performance of states in the country using the 4 key indices. The pilot of this was launched in 2012, and it covered 15 states in this country. But for this year, we have the 36 states covered. And like I said earlier, our theme is trends in public finance management at the sub-national level. To tell you more about this and more on what SEDOC is doing and this whole national survey, let me welcome a member of the SEDOC Nigerian board. I think I saw her outside. And she's the former acting registrar general of CAC, Lady Azuka Obiageli. Lady Azuka Obiageli. Please, could you call her? Okay, if she's not around, maybe she'll do her welcome address some time before the close of the program. We'll go straight to our goodwill messages. And first, I want to call on the governance team lead. Okay. We don't know the representative of World Bank here, the EU, USAID, OGP, Governors Forum, Ministry of Finance and Budget and National Planning, CDD, MacArthur. Okay, then maybe I should go straight to Action Aid, where I'll call the Social Mobilization Manager, Mr. Adewale Adeduto, for his goodwill message. Please, a round of applause for him.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the board, management, and staff of Action Aid Nigeria, particularly for my country director, Comrade Ene Obi, who is unavoidably absent. As we speak, she's not in the country. Otherwise, she would have loved to be here in person. And the message from her and the entire organization is such that we appreciate all that Civil Resource Development and Documentation Center Nigeria does. Because if we drop the ball of transparency like we have always done, and that is the reality, we are going nowhere. The effort we beam at the national level, if we channel the same strength, energy, and floodlight at the subnational level, sincerely speaking, Nigeria will have further than where we are today. And as we look at what the findings of this report will look like, of course, many of us may have ideas, suggestive ones, in terms of what this report could be, based on how we have the governors and other people at the subnational level manage our resources. It's unfortunate that we have people who should be accountable to the masses diverting resources meant for the people. And we are saying that the only way to go, particularly that we have new set of governors on board, and they are trying to settle down, we don't have any other thing to do other than to engage. The word, again, is to engage. And at all levels, we have to engage. Otherwise, we always get the same level of outcomes that we have always gotten. On this note, I say thank you to everyone that is here, and we wish us happy deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oduto, for that. I was just trying to clarify. I know we have Uchenna Arisuku from OGP, Open Governance Partnership, and I don't know, where is he? Yeah. Are you the one giving the goodwill message, or lady? I hear your co-chair is here too. Okay. Okay, somebody just told me she was here. I also want to recognize the presence of, and we apologize for this oversight, it wasn't deliberate, the Permanent Secretary, Budget and Planning in Borno State, Stephen Paksha. There's a round of applause for him. Thank you very much. Okay. So, CDD. Well, he said he wasn't given okay. Do we have a representative from MacArthur Foundation here? So while we tend to make this program as fast as possible, any other person can come in and give their goodwill message as time goes on. We are going straight into the plenary sessions. And this plenary session will be anchored by someone who I have known for many years, someone who has been very vocal in not only public affairs, but specifically about budgeting, the budgeting process, and all of it. He's the director of the center, executive director of the Center for Social Justice in Abuja. He's a lawyer and has been in the forefront of advocating for fiscal responsibility and transparency in public spending. In fact, he has also been an advocate, but I'm not saying people should attack him here. He has also been an advocate of subsidy removal. So, don't attack him yet, because he's not the president. And I see reason with what he says when he talks about subsidy removal. But anyway, let us welcome Eze Oyekpe to anchor this plenary session. Please, can I get the other mic?
A very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome, first of all, my colleagues that we are going to share the panel. Mr. Chris Okeke, Senior Governance Advisor of FCDO. Please, can we join us on this? Dr. Tive Ibuzo, former Director, St. LLC. Obianonam Nobi Ayodele, Civil Society Advisor, Co-Chair, Non-State Actors, OGP. Is she here? And Lady Idayat Hassan, Executive Director of CDD. Is she represented? Okay. Well, this panel, okay. All right, join us, Ma, to the table. So we have a complete team. This panel is going to discuss what I termed expounding the frontiers of subnational transparency and accountability. We are going to have the 4 panelists to answer some questions and enlighten us on issues around subnational fiscal transparency. Well, let me introduce the topic saying that the documentation undertaken by CDOC could not have come at a more auspicious time because we are currently facing at the federal and state levels issues around economic and fiscal challenges. And if we do not increase fiscal transparency and accountability at this time, we may not be able to come out of this very deep hole that we are into. So the report is focusing on 5 key indicators: public availability of budget information, public participation in the budgeting process, strength of oversight institutions, public availability of procurement information. So this is the time for us to talk about them. We have 36 states, the Federal Capital Territory, and 1 federation. Yes, they may be ruled by governors, but it's just one economy. So monetary and fiscal crises and new ideas are needed beyond ideas and practices that led us into this challenge. I mean, the other day, I think the Debt Management Office has just given us the figures up till March this year. But those figures, we are still calculated at 465 Naira to the dollar. So for me, they are not yet updated. These are not the final figures. They say it's 49 trillion minus the 23 trillion ways and means. So by the time we update them, we could possibly be hitting 90, 100 trillion in debts, which we have to pay. So why do we need improvements and enhancement in budget transparency? First of all, we need to bust this myth that things cannot go well in this country and that transparency and accountability is not possible, especially at the subnational level. So first of all, at an aggregate level, transparency requires the provision of reliable information on government's fiscal intentions and forecasts. We need detailed data and information on government's operations, including the publication of comprehensive budget documents that embody properly classified accounts of the government and estimates of quasi-fiscal activities undertaken outside government. Clear definition of conflict of interest rules for elected and appointed officials, which meets freedom of information requirements. We need existence of non-opaque regulatory frameworks, open public procurement and employment practices, code of conduct for tax officials, and published performance audits. Transparency is at the heart of good governance in both the public and private sectors because it helps people prevent people and institutions from doing things that cannot stand the test of scrutiny from the outside. There are things you may wish to do in secret, but if you know that people are watching you, you are not likely going to do it. It provides the feedback for informed debate on budgeting, on policies and issues, is a prerequisite for public debate, which can lead to better program and more efficient resource use. For example, if budget information is not available, it's extremely difficult to discuss it, because transparency facilitates clarifications and identification of weaknesses, thus facilitating the adoption of needed reforms. Transparent governments can be held accountable. Legislature and civil society will be better be able to hold government accountable if they have the information on government programs, policies, practices, and expenditure. Indeed, transparency is the fulcrum for popular participation. If you don't have information, you cannot discuss it, you cannot critique it, you cannot even profile recommendations or suggestions for the way forward. So, if elected public officials know that we are watching them and that their decisions are open to public scrutiny, they may decide to behave in a more responsible manner than is currently the case. Of course, if you open up the books and everybody knows how much you're getting and sees where exactly you are putting it, there will be more faith in governance, because everybody will see that actually nobody is mismanaging resources. I usually crack this joke about transparency. You have your hand cupped, and people are saying, Eze, you are holding all the things in the world. You don't need to call a senior advocate of Nigeria or call anybody to intervene for you. All you need to do is like this. And that's the end of the question. So, transparency contributes to macroeconomic and fiscal stability, as it prevents the building up of a crisis in secret, bringing about smaller adjustments sooner than later. So we are discussing transparency, which is also tied to accountability. In our accountability, we should be interested in what resources are available, what the state spends on, performance and results. Where exactly are we putting the money? Is it value for money? Is it fit for the purpose that we advertise that we are spending the money for? So we are also going to raise questions about whether we are fulfilling human rights obligations, the duty to respect, protect, and fulfill. Whether it's in education, whether it's in health, whether it's in access to water, whether it is about all that we do encapsulated in the right to an adequate standard of living, which encompasses everything we talk about, whether it's a livable environment, employment, or the things that make life worth living. In terms of participation, there is this big idea that the common people, that me and you, we do not understand big sounding macroeconomic policies, charts and graphs. I used to joke about it in those days, Okonji, while I was here. She brings charts and graphs and the information. She took 6 months to prepare. She wants to present it in 30 minutes. Before you could focus on one graph, she moves to the next graph or chart. And at the end of the day, in 30 minutes, she has presented what she took 6 months to prepare. And you are supposed to have queued in to ask questions and participate. That's not the kind of participation we have. We are discussing information being out there in the public domain. And everybody being given the opportunity to sit down, read it, and digest it, and make contributions to macroeconomic policy, because there is nothing strange in economics that anybody cannot discuss, because we are discussing issues around resources that touch us on a daily basis. So we don't want the impression to be given that we are participating when we are not actually participating. That what happens is that you are called to what amounts to a show, a few documents, graphs, and slides presented to you, and at the end of the day, it will be said you have participated. But in actual fact, none of the recommendations you made, if you look through the final report, will be there. That is not participation. Okay, so having done this introduction, we are going to move to the panel to take questions and comments. So the first panelist is Dr. Tive, and the second is Idayat Hassan. She's not here? Okay, all right. And the third is Dr. Chris Okeke, while OGP is the fourth. So let's start with you, Dr. Tive. What new developments and practices will you advocate for improving fiscal transparency going forward? You have the mic here? Okay. So let's take you 3-4 minutes to dwell on that.
Very much. What new development and practices will I advocate? I have no new practices to advocate. I want to advocate old practices. Because why we are where we are is that the old practices are not followed. Everywhere in the world, there are 4 mechanisms for promoting transparency and accountability. Number 1 is government procedure and financial system. So every ministry, department, and agency will have financial circulars, monitoring and evaluation, procurement procedures, code of ethics, and all of that. So those government ministries and agencies, the executing agency, they follow those procedures. Number 2 is legislative oversight. The legislator approves, monitors, ensure that when there is release, the procurement procedure is followed and that the money is used for what is budgeted for. Number 3, citizens and the media. The citizens monitor the budget, they monitor the programs, they monitor the policies, use different methodologies, social audit, budget analysis, including even protest and demonstration to ensure that the procedures are followed. And number 4, independent institutions like the ICPC and EFCC. Why we are where we are in Nigeria is because these 4 systems are not working optimally. And you see that at the federal level is better than the state level because these 4 mechanisms are working better at the federal level. There is no shortcut. There is no magic bullet. Even in developed countries, once you reduce any of these systems, corruption comes. I'm sure many of you will remember this. I always give this story. There was a time in the United Kingdom, you know, in the UK, they have a budget for parliament where parliamentarians, they can go on visit, they bring receipt and claim it. They can go on even social visit, go to a restaurant and then buy things, you bring the receipt, you come back and claim it. You know that side is not like here. If you are a public officer, if you have a girlfriend, you hide it. Not here that you are a public, if I are a public officer, we don't know how many wives they have. We don't know how many children they have. But there, if you have a girlfriend, you hide it. But this particular, I'm sure Chris will remember this incident. Many of the people, they don't check that account. So people will go out with their girlfriend. The girlfriend will write her own name. And then the parliamentarian will go back and claim it. So 1 year, a few years ago, they opened it. And what happened? Many parliamentarians lost their seats. Many politicians lost their position. So the point I'm making is that in every society, Robert Kizars gave a formula for corruption. That in any society where there is monopoly, there is discretion, there is lack of transparency, there is lack of accountability, and lack of integrity, there will be corruption. What we need to do in Nigeria is these 4 systems must be made to work.
Okay, you have identified already existing systems and laws and policies to be enforced. Are you perchance suggesting that there is no need for any new policy or amendment of any existing law?
not that, you know. What I'm saying is that the challenge we have today is that even the current laws are not being followed. I mean, I'm happy here. There are many permanent secretaries, director of budget. The reality is that the Procurement Act, you know, let's be real. There's a Procurement Act for Nigeria, which was signed in 2007. So it's not law. The Procurement Act says that there should be a procurement council. And the membership of the procurement council has a civil society representative and a journalist. But that Procurement Act survived Yaradua. It survived Jonathan. It survived Buhari. None of them, none, in flagrant abuse of the act, none of them constituted the council. Till today, they have not amended the law. So all the procurement that they are doing ever since, no one is following. Because how can you bring a civil society to come and know how much they are budgeting? All these permanent secretary here, they will tell us. They can buy biro, this big biro. If you see the cost, you will be amazed. So they didn't want the journalists to see it. They didn't want the civil society. That's why they did not constitute the council. It's not because of the other people. Because at the time, they tried to bring a law so that they remove the civil society and the journalists. But it did not succeed. So what I'm saying, yes, we can look at some of the laws, but even the law, you know, easy. The Federal Responsibility Act has a threshold. Are we following it? We have sufficient laws today. If we can bring new laws, there's the greatest room in this world is the room for improvement. But I'm saying that let's not despair. Let's not think that one Messiah will come from somewhere and implement everything, and then there will be transparency and accountability in Nigeria. We must do our part as citizens. Media must do its part. Parliament must do its part. Somebody was telling me yesterday, I can't remember who, that the speaker in his state cannot speak English. The speaker of House of you know?
Okay.
I say, if the speaker is lucky, after 8 years, he will become governor. It happens.
All right. Thank you. I think the central message is implement existing laws and policies before we start thinking of new ones. So, panelist 2 from CDD. How do we advocate for improved procurement to deliver more value for money at the state level? TV have talked about the federal level procurement, and of course, the states, most of them model their procurement laws and policies after the Federal Public Procurement Act. So what do we need to do to improve procurement at the state level?
Thank you very much. One of the big issues that we find, thank you. So one of the biggest issues that we found, especially while looking at the election process, especially the last recently concluded ones, is the fact that there's usually a lot of focus, a lot of attention at the federal level, but then it's subtly and it rarely comes back down when you're looking at state level elections. Many of the observers, many of the focus is usually on the federal level, and then usually what that means is that that level of external oversight and usually that level of accountability is much more present there, but it's rarely present at state level. And then what you now find is that because of that, there's a lack of civic engagement, there's a lack of active oversight, especially from citizens, to try to check on many of these issues that are present. Now, one thing that is really important is the fact that when you're looking at issues of trying to improve procurement, usually these things come from the fact that you have opaque systems that are usually, like Dr. already mentioned, not being followed, or in some cases are just being hidden, because that's the best way to ensure that nobody understands or nobody knows what is going on. So one of the things that's really important is actually one of the recommendations from the report, which is in making sure that documents and policies are openly accessible. Is making sure that, especially in state governments that might not have the capacity to have easily accessible websites or even areas for researchers to go and check and make sure that these things are being followed, that there's capacity building in that particular area, so that these particular organizations, these ministries can easily say, okay, fine, this is what we procured over the last couple of months, this is how we did it, this is what the process was, and then this is how we can now follow up on that. By doing that, if a CSO or a citizen wants to say, okay, fine, let me make sure that my own state legislator is able to ask questions or actually probe this in during one of their sittings, then they can do that. They have the information to actually inform what they are doing. But then the problem is that when you don't have any inkling of what is going on, all you get is a very big, broad number. And then you now know, okay, fine, you just said that they bought it for X amount of naira, but we don't know if that naira was even, if the process was even competitive, if they could even challenge it, if they could even get it at a cheaper level. In some cases, if they could even get it within the states and even help to make sure that there's much more development in different sectors. So the really important thing is making sure that there's capacity building, especially for these state ministries, and then making sure that that level of oversight and support is actually very present. That's one of the really important things to ensure that we can improve state capacity on the level that the federal currently is at.
Can I ask you if there's any link between the level and quality and transparency in politics? Is it in any way related at the state level to current procurement practices? What is the link between public procurement and politics?
So I think there's a very, very important correlation, especially when you look at the way. Thank you. There's a very important correlation when you look at the way, even just the focus that federal politics has against state politics. For example, during recent elections, whenever you have a presidential election, you have tens of thousands of observers, domestic and international, coming down and making sure that they can see what is going on. At state level, you rarely find them even staying in the country long enough to even go and see what's going on there. And what you find is that many of these direct impacts, issues are things that happen at state level, at local level. It's really trying to make sure that you can improve the capacity of these governments and these organizations to actively follow through on their responsibilities to citizens. So obviously what you now find is that because there's more of a focus there, many organizations, many, even external missions that want to support will end up gearing their focus on areas that they can easily get tangible reports from, which is usually at the federal level. But then the state level is ultimately very important. Like we've already mentioned, there are 36 states, and not all of them will get equal attention or equal, or even just an equal focus when it comes to, ensuring that there's coverage. But then what's really important is that where possible, that there is that level of support to make sure that, okay, fine, we can actually look at what's going on. Now, if you're if you're a state that is not having an off-cycle election, or is not one of the states that is usually much more focused on, what happens is that many of these processes can just go under the wire and just keep going without the necessary rigor and attention that's required. So that's why when now trying to convert that back down, you're now looking at a case where if the process to get the elected officials or the senior officials was not followed with that level of rigor or oversight, then when they're actually in office, you will not see any subsequent follow through because they're already there and then nobody's going to follow through on that particular point. So it's making sure that if you can now start from the very beginning, when somebody's getting elected, when somebody's getting appointed, you know that there are these processes that are laid down and people are actually following through. When somebody gets there, they themselves will know that if I went through this to get here, now that I'm even here, there's going to be even more. So I can now make sure that I actually follow through on these processes so that when it gets to the next election, then these things become much more stable and much more entrenched.
Thank you. Let's get to panelist 3. Chris, what is responsible for high levels of indebtedness across the states? And what steps are necessary or do you recommend to ensure that subnational debts become sustainable?
Thank you very much. 2 questions there, and I think we could possibly take over an hour discussing these debt issues, given the situation we are in the country. Let me just start. I think the starting point is to note that first, the levels of indebtedness has a direct correlation with the broad macroeconomic system at this point, on macroeconomic environment, looking at one, the fiscal strategy at the state level, looking at the monetary policy and the forex exchange rate at the level. And I'll come back and I'll break this down a little bit. And then looking at public expenditure. Let's start first with the fiscal policy. You talked earlier about the DMO report that just came out for March 2023. And the total debt stock for states is about 5.5 trillion. And when you look at the states, the highest indebted states, there's a direct correlation between the highest indebted state and states that have generated the most IGR. So for example, Lagos State has about 1.something trillion as the highest debt. Lagos State, Ogun State, and maybe River State generate over 50% of their IGR. Now, when you look at states that are able to generate, and the same challenge is replicated at the federal level, when you look at states that are able to generate IGR, there is the tendency that they can repay their loan, and so they have the ability to absorb debt. Most state level, when you take out Lagos State, Ogun State, River State, and maybe FCT, the average rate of IGR compared to FAC is about 25%. And many of the states, when you look at the debt stock, they are the states that are the most indebted and have the risk not to repay. So a major issue first is around the macro level, which is about issues around fiscal policy at the state level. Then let's go down to the composition of the state debt, the domestic debt and the foreign debt. Where states have a large percentage of their debt, mostly domestic debt, and commercial loans from banks, which is very expensive, high interest rates over 20%, and for a short period, over 5 years, it means that there will be strain on the state's ability to repay over that short period. Compare that to the foreign debt where you have concessional loans and you have over 15 years period. And so the composition of that debt will determine, to an extent, the ability of states to pay and their level of indebtedness. Let's look at the wage bill of many states. In one state, just before the election, the governor recruited over 10,000 civil servants, perhaps to punish his successor. And you see that replicated where you have high wage bill both at the local government level and at the state level. And state government would then have the challenge of dealing with issues of pension arrears and gratuity. Let's not even start with the contractual liability and arrears that many state governors have built up over time. So when you look at that composition of what constitutes the state debt, you will see some of these challenges. Let's quickly move on to something very important, and I think we haven't discussed a lot about that, and that's the ability of the state houses of assembly to actually scrutinize application for debt. When you look at the Fiscal Responsibility Act, for federal government and state government, when you have to apply for loan, the state houses of assembly must scrutinize, understand what it's for. How many state houses of assembly have been able to scrutinize and analyze debt and loans that chief executives have applied for? That is a major issue. If they can't provide oversight function, then there's the possibility that loans will be collected not for the right purpose. Let's also look at the issue you talked about, and there's, particularly at this point of political transition, there's the political risk that new governors, for example, they want to show within 100 days that they are capable of delivering. And so in doing so, many governors might want to embark on commercial loans to undertake fiscal projects that people can see. That's a big question that we need to look at. And then finally, on that issue about levels of indebtedness, is about, what was the point I was going to? It's about the risk you talked about, the forest risk. At this point, the total state debt stock is 5 trillion. Wait till we then take account of the current exchange situation. That debt will then balloon. How many states have taken that to account? And then to the second part of the question, and that was why I said that if we were to talk about this debt issue, we could be here for a long time. The second part of the question is, what should we then do? I think the starting point, and many states have started doing this as a result of the SIFTAS program, is about the debt sustainability plan. But there's still a lot more to be done. Helping states to identify and track your threshold around debt versus revenue, total debt versus revenue, total debt servicing versus revenue, and interest rate versus revenue. If you don't have clarity around these issues, then you continue to borrow without knowing the state of your state. The second bit is around, we talked about fiscal situation and budget reform. We need states to focus on IGR. If you can't generate IGR, it means that you have to be dependent on loan. That means that you don't have the capacity to repay the loan. And then finally, the point around Otivie mentioned about accountability. What is the role of civil society organizations? What is the role of media in the process of actually calling chief executives to account, holding them accountable, scrutinizing the law on debt, and asking the right questions about how states are able to meet their debt obligation?
Okay, thank you. OGP, what role can the open government partnership play in enhancing accountability and transparency at the state level? What exactly is going on? What's OGP doing? And how do you play at that state level?
Thank you very much, Eze. So I'll start with a brief overview of what the OGP is about, and then we can go further. So the Open Government Partnership, OGP, is a multi-stakeholder forum that provides a platform for government and civil society to come together to co-create and collaboratively implement commitments that drive reforms. And these reforms are expected to meet your contextual needs, contextual development needs as a country, as a subnational. Currently, we have 25 states in Nigeria who are signed on to the OGP process, as well as the Abuja Municipal Area Council. So that brings 26 subnationals in Nigeria. And the OGP is built on principles of transparency, accountability, integrity, citizens' participation, and engagement. The whole idea here is that for once, government and civil society come together. It's no more an us against them, but together we are able to determine equally what are our needs, what priorities should we focus on, and then determine how to drive these reforms. So how do we do this? We do understand, of course, that the subnational governments are the governments that are closest to the people. Every time we talk about what is happening in Abuja, but there are hundreds of Abuja around the country that we are not focusing on. So we want to look at how these governments that mostly impact directly on the people, how they are able to use the OGP platform to drive reform. And this is basically change. And so we understand that at the end of the day, the goals for us are the same: decent livelihood for all Nigerians, healthcare, employment, education. That is what all of us want as Nigerians. So to drive this, OGP provides a platform at subnational level for both government and civil society to come up with institutional and legal frameworks that will drive these reforms. And let me just say also that OGP is not something new. It's not a standalone. It is a platform that basically brings together all of those reforms that government has already been undertaking and new ones that we will, together collaboratively come up with to see that we engender development in our country. So, first of all, we need to create institutional legal frameworks that drive this reform. And where they already exist, we need to see how to strengthen and sustain them. These reforms are around procurement, they are around participatory budgeting, the audit process, anti-corruption, fiscal responsibility, the full works, everything that we have been talking about for the longest of times. we also need to drive high-level political support, and that is part of what the OGP does. So when you identify reformers from the government side who bring the political will and bring the resources to the table, then it is possible that those reforms, those laws, or those policies that have been established already, it's possible to implement them. Moving from that, we want to build capacity of the public service, because the public service is really the engine room of driving the OGP and of driving reforms in the country. So even at subnational level, we want to see that the public service is well resourced in terms of finances, in terms of human capital, and then we also want to build up their capacity so that they're able to drive and implement these reforms. Because it's one thing to come up with laws and come up with great ideas and recommendations and suggestions, but if the people who should drive them do not have the capacity, and then we're going nowhere. It's also very important for us that we sustain the civic space. And that is something that we've been talking about lately, NSAS, Twitter ban, and things like that. But it's very important that we sustain that space, because that is how the civil society will be able to hold, they'll be protected and safe enough to hold government to account. So when government, for instance, in terms of participation, which is the next thing, civil society participation, part of participation is that we come together, government shares their ideas or their objectives. This is what we want to do. This is what we're going to do with the public resources, which is all our money. This is how we're going to do it. And then civil society has the capacity to engage. They have the knowledge to engage at that level. And then we can come back afterwards when government still comes back to show the outcome. So this is what we said we have done. This is what we have done. And then civil society can hold them accountable. But the civic space needs to be safe for all players to participate in that. I think I will stop here.
Yeah, thank you. We are going to have the second round of questioning, which is the final one. Please, let's take about 3 minutes to do the second answer to the second round. So, Dr. TV, oversight institutions like the state legislature and Auditor General seem not to be working. Okay, they seem not strong enough to hold the almighty chief executive to account. You've been a player, and I once thought you bought a form to become a governor in your state. So, what could be responsible for this almighty executive that seems so strong that the legislature is not able to hold it to account? Auditor General is also not able to actually whip it into line.
Yeah, it's a system issue. The whole system is structured in a way that does not favor accountability. If a governor in this our current Nigeria insists on transparency and accountability at all levels, in all ministries, in local government, he will not win re-election. He will not win re-election. Huh? He will not. He will lose. In, I think around 2007, there was a assessment of legislators in Nigeria using global standards on who is the best legislator. And the Senator when they went for primaries, he didn't get a nomination. Do to oil machinery. So, you know, if you look, he said, deducted on why he lost. The major reason was that he was not doing stomach infrastructure. So it's a systemic thing. The system makes it possible for the governor to choose who will be candidates for House of Assembly. It makes it possible for the governor to choose all the local government chairmen. And if he's a grassrooted governor, he will choose the councillors. So the entire system is in the hands of the governor. And there is no incentive to have a non-pliant House of Assembly. Because, if the House of Assembly or even the legislature at the council level want to exert their power, in some cases, they will exert their power to extort money from you. So that is why I say, look, it's a systemic thing, and to change it, if you like, call governors emperors from here to tomorrow, it will not change anything. What will change things is that, look, citizens, media will do their work. People who, and we still have many of them in the country, people who are committed to public service go into state houses of assembly. Why is it that you have a member of House of Assembly who cannot speak English? If you've been involved in these politics, many of you here who are middle class people, you think that politics is too dirty. So what happens? The motor park leader in your local government is the chairman of APC, is the chairman of PDP. So to change all of these things required active participation by everyone. Those four things I talked about, the governmental instruments, the media and civil society, citizens, the independent, don't you wonder why only few states talk about corruption? I'm not saying fight, talk. I don't know whether you understand me. That today they are holding a workshop. How do we curb corruption in this state? They don't mention it at all. If there is any mention of corruption in any state, is that EFCC is pursuing somebody. But do you know that most states in Nigeria, by population, are more than 50 smallest countries in the world? There are countries in the world, Seychelles, Sao Tome and Principe, we have less than 1 million people. There are many countries in the world, Gambia, that have less than 4 million people. And many states in this country can actually operate as country. But what we need today, I always do what I call political economy of the street. So anytime I go to any place, I get a taxi driver, I ask question. You will discover that taxi drivers are like professors of political economy. They understand the issues. They can identify why the problem is available in the country. But the challenge is that there is no movement to the level of consciousness where they think that they can do something, and there is no movement to the level of organizing for change. And we have a very spineless, greedy, and uncommitted middle class in this country who always want to move to the high level, and therefore they don't commit themselves to change. All of us here, if we want change in this country, we must commit to change. In fact, at times people will call me, say, Otive, we are not hearing you talk on television again. I ask them, is mouth paining you? Some of you think that there are some people who will talk, then you will sit down, in your country, you will do your things, you will make your money, then some other people talk. If they arrest them, you will not say anything.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a good one. You are not the only one who has been asked. It's long we last saw you on television. Okay? But I think the key point made is that my own takeaway from what he said is that political reform precedes fiscal and governance reform. Because I'm one of those who call governors emperors. And honestly, the way states are run is run like most governors behave like emperors. The president can't afford to do half of what governors do. Because if you do it, somebody will say, oh, you are doing it because you are a Christian or a Muslim, or you are doing it because of tribe. All those things will come up. But governors really do things and get away with them at the state level. So thank you. Let's go to panelist 2, procurement. Part of the challenge we see is that people are not really involved in the public procurement process. It's become an esoteric process. You advertise for bids, sit down, set up a committee to examine and evaluate it, announce results. Nobody actually knows what has happened. What do you suggest will be the recommendations for getting more Nigerians into the procurement system to observe, to understand what is going on, and to review and critique?
Thank you. I think the first thing really would be to actually follow through with the constitution of procurement councils, because usually you're meant to have a civil society representative there. And having those kind of groups that can also provide a level of accountability by saying, okay, fine, this process was not followed, it was not, actually gone according to the law. Then the second thing is now about making sure that ultimately people feel confident in the process enough to even take part. If you see a procurement bid, chances are somebody has already made an arrangement with the person who put it up in the first place, and then they already feel confident that they are going to get it. So it becomes a very formalized process of what people have already agreed upon before. So what you need to do is to get to a point where we are actively changing the perception, where citizens can feel confident that, okay, fine, I don't need to know the person who is the commissioner or who is the director, but if I bid and I have the right bid, I can actually get the actual contract. And then by doing that, what you're trying to do is to change the entire perception of the public trust, the way that citizens interact with government. And I know that we've heard quite a lot about how CSOs can play a very big role, but then it's a very mutual responsibility where CSOs can play a very important role in holding governments to account. But then there is a responsibility that governments have also in informing citizens and making sure that, okay, fine, we are going beyond just putting it out there. We're actively trying to make sure that, okay, fine, just so you know that this is what is coming on, this is how to go about it, this is how to really improve that particular capacity. I think on a state level it's even much more important, because these are things that can also help to improve the way that states even generate their own revenue. It can even be a case of trying to ensure that, at least in different regards, you can actively make sure that even the companies that are getting these contracts are within the state, so that it's even adding to employment and adding to even much more other sectors within that state's particular capacity. So ultimately, it's really important in making sure that we're changing the perception that citizens have when they interact with politics and just in the public space in general. If people don't feel invested in the process, then they won't feel invested in the outcomes. So it's about making sure that that is actually what is followed through, so that we can even change, not just beyond procurement, but even the way that states interact within the country. Thank you.
All right. The third panelist, if you look at the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the laws at the state level and the Investment and Securities Act, and of course the DMO law, a lot of provisions are made in terms of documentation before you borrow. Now, what are these documents that need to be made public to improve transparency and accountability? One, at the level of the decision to borrow. Two, in the management of borrowed funds. And three, accounting for borrowed money.
Thank you, Eze. When we look at, I talked earlier about first understanding the macro level before decisions are made, and documentation that would help in the planning process. The first document we need to start looking at, particularly for citizens' participation, is medium-term expenditure frameworks that sets out clearly, and many government officials are quite used to this document. It sets out clearly the assumptions, the macro-level assumptions of revenue, expenditure, as well as debt. This gives citizens and even officials the full picture in terms of the direction and where states are going on revenue and including debt. Specifically on debt, we need to look at the debt sustainability plan or strategy or analysis and the medium-term debt sustainability strategy. Again, with this, it tells us clearly the direction of the state, where they are going, the composition of debt, the legal limits within which states can borrow and repay debt. When you have that out there, it means that civil society organizations can hold government accountable at the point of planning. Similarly, we're looking at the annual budget document, which again should be public and everyone should understand the content of the annual budget. Linked to that is the citizens' budget that simplifies this. I mean, many annual budgets, if you look at them at the federal level, it's about 50-something pages. People do not understand that budget. So you need to break it down to what we call citizens' budget so that citizens can easily look at, understand the content, including on the debt element. In terms of the implementation phase now and understanding that, we now need to look at debt analysis and budget performance report. Many states, they embark on quarterly budget performance reports, for example, or 6 monthly. But that needs to be out there so that people can scrutinize and understand the level of budget implementation. And then finally, in terms of reporting, we now need to start looking at the state's financial statements, audited financial reports in particular. Again, Otivie talked about the role of audit process within that to report and ensure that government officials and government, they are held accountable. And then finally, linked to the audited financial statement is the Citizens Accountability Report, which with the SIFTAS program has now been socialized, and many states are beginning to develop a Citizens Accountability Report, which is similar to the audited report, but simplified for citizens to understand and navigate through those technical issues around public financial management system and audit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. OGP, let's find out from you if there are critical lessons of transparency and accountability from subnationals outside of Nigeria that, or even within Nigeria, if there are critical lessons in terms of success that you can share to demonstrate the issues around transparency for results.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. Around the world, because OGP is an international partnership, stakeholder initiative, there are a lot of lessons, but I would like to stick to the homegrown lessons that we have. So for instance, Kaduna State is a member of OGP Global. They are part of the OGP local initiative where OGP is working with subnationals around the world to replicate sort of what is happening at the national level. And over the years, we have seen tremendous success with the work that they are doing in Kaduna. In fact, Kaduna is considered a star, in the OGP community. And part of it is around citizens' participation. But for instance, they've managed to use technology, innovative technology, to get citizens on board with what government is doing. So they have a program called Eyes and Ears, where citizens can basically follow through with government programs, make their report, sort of like monitoring, but citizens-led now, and it is open. Everybody can see what is happening, what projects did government say they were going to embark on, where are they on those projects, and things like that. So I think that it is something that other states can also replicate. Civil society can support with that. For instance, Budget has an app called Tracker Mobile, where they are working with the communities, with civil society, citizens at community level to put up projects, show the level of implementation. I think it's mostly around constituency projects now, but they have plans to improve. There are also a number of different avenues. But I also want us to look at the improvement that we have seen at the federal level in terms of budget transparency in Nigeria, because it is also a homegrown solution and we can replicate that across the state. So in 2021, in the 2021 cycle, we have improved tremendously on a global level. I think Nigeria had the most in terms of improved countries for budget transparency. And why did this happen? Part of it was because there was a lot of citizens' engagement and participation in the budgeting process. So not just did citizens participate in the budget presentations, but there was also things like citizens' budgets, the information is out there. I mean, everybody, all of us in this room can log onto the Budget Office of Nigeria website and access the budget. It's available in easy-to-use formats and things like that. There are also simplified versions of it. The Budget Office is also very accessible, so you can reach out to them with questions, you can get answers. But I think that we can go a step further. So apart from working with what we've already seen in terms of citizens' participation in the budgeting process, I think that now with beneficial ownership transparency laws, that at state level we can move further and look at what is happening in terms of procurement. So when those companies bid, or the companies that get the public contracts, we can actually determine the ownership, beneficial ownership of these countries. And that is now for civil society to use that information to hold government to account. So are these contracts being given to companies that are linked to politically exposed persons? I mean, is this a family and friends affair, you know, with public resources? So that is something for civil society to look at, for us to engage. So when I talked previously also about us building capacity as civil society, that is part of where that capacity building, sensitization, enlightenment comes in.
Okay, thank you. Let me just attempt a quick summary. For me, it appears that political reform is key because, like Otive did say, if somebody is responsible for bringing all the members of the State House of Assembly on board, appoints everybody that needs to be appointed, very few people will summon the courage to look him in the face to say, sir, you are wrong, change. And if you try to do that, you may get yourself out of the line because, like I understand, State Houses of Assembly change their leadership at the slightest excuse. Indeed, yesterday I read about, not even a change now, one State House of Assembly around the North Central approved 15 billion naira for their governor to pay salaries. And the words of the Fiscal Responsibility Act are very clear. You don't borrow for recurrent expenditure. You only borrow for regenerative expenditure. You invest and hope that investment will help you to repay in future. I'm not saying people should be owed salaries, but taking 15 billion in loan from a commercial bank to pay salaries cannot be sustainable. The second one is the issue of capacity building, which we make a song and a dance out of every time. Do we really need more capacity building for either federal or subnational officers, or do we need to design an integrity building course or training? In the year 2006, I led the budget planning team that went for SIS benchmarking in Kebbi State. I led it. National Planning Commission was doing that. And we went around, did a lot of things. 2006. Last year, I led the SIFTAS team, World Bank team, that went back to the same state to do training. And we were repeating what we said in 2006 in 2013. How many years? 2022, about 15 years. And the person who was in charge, I was liaising with when we were doing SIS benchmarking, has now become a PAMSEC. So immediately he saw me, he said, Eze, what are you doing here? I said, what are you doing here? We now agreed we have an unfinished business in 2006, which we came back in 2022 to complete. So is it capacity building or integrity building that we need? Finally, we need implementation of laws. At least let us implement the laws that we've already made and see the mileage we can get out of it. For instance, the SIFTAS program, virtually every state enacted a new audit law, which says Auditor General should be drawing money from a first line charge, which says nobody should disturb them how they implement their laws. I was part of the team that did the basic draft of that law. And I know I went to the Auditor General's conference that year, 6-7 months down the line. And I spoke to virtually each of the Auditor Generals, and all of them I run into. They said, Eze, forget it. The law is there. Maybe it was one of these milestones that need to be achieved for each state to draw about $1 million. So states quickly got the law passed, but put it in a shelf. I can virtually tell you that I haven't come across an Auditor General who says he's drawing money on a first line charge contrary to the provisions of their law. So let me stop here. The message is clear. Let's implement existing laws. Let's not leave the struggle to Otive and a few people. Let everybody be part of it, and then we can win in future. Thank you, the panel.
Please, a round of applause for Eze Onyekwere and the panel again. Thank you very much. You see, it's always very disheartening when we come and repeat the same thing almost every year, where we talk about this budgeting, oversight, audit. We've been saying these things we said it for 8 years. For a whole government, nothing happened. But when I see people like, when I want to give up and I see people like Otive, I see people like Eze, I can't give up. Chris Okeke, you were here like 3 years ago. We came and talked about this kind of thing too. I mean, we keep on talking about it. It's sad. It's the sad reality of Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, while the panel session was going on, the member of SEDOC Nigerian Board and former acting Registrar General of CAC, Lady Azuka Obiageli Azinge, came in. Please, a round of applause for her. Just recognize her. I want to welcome the team lead governance and stability block of the FCDO, Magdalene Lago. And from the Nigerian Governors Forum, we have the senior economist, Abdulaziz Olorunshola. Did I pronounce it well? And somebody says Dr. Kole Shutima is around. I haven't seen him. That's why I was stuttering, because they sent me his name that he's around. But I also know that Uzochukwu Aluta, who is the Economic Reform Programs Manager for the EU, is around, and he is here representing Ruben Alba Aguilera. A round of applause for Uzochukwu. Thank you very much. Without much ado, let's go back. So as we welcome Lady Azinge to have a welcome address and an opening remark. Please, a round of applause for her.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I won't take our time. I know the protocol has been well established, so I crave your indulgence to stand on the existing protocol. I'm here representing Barrister Mrs. Ralo Wankwa Obioha, who happens to be the Executive Director of SEDOC, but unavoidably absent. I am one of the board members of SEDOC, so I'll be representing her. So I go on to the address. With great pleasure, I welcome you. First, let me apologize. I know I was a little late. There was a mix-up with the timing. I had the impression it was starting 10:30. So I'm really sorry. I need to apologize. We're talking about transparency and accountability. With great pleasure, I welcome you to the launch of the 2022 Sub-National Budget Transparency Survey results. I am certain that I will speak the minds of coordinators, supervisors, and researchers when I say it is yet another long and tough journey. Gathering information for the state's budget transparency results, we are launching and disseminating today. This is the 5th report since the pilot in 2012, which covered only 15 states. 2015, 2018, 2020, and now 2022 covered 36 states of the Federation. The Sub-National Budget Transparency Survey, the SNBTC, is a project implemented by the Civil Resource Development and Documentation Center, that's SEDOC, and funded by the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, that's the FCDO, with the general goal of instilling transparency in budgeting and budget process across the 36 states of the Federation by focusing on 5 key indicators: public availability of budget information, public participation in the budget process, the strength of the oversight institutions, public availability of procurement information. As we all know, budget transparency entails all citizens assessing information on how much is allocated to different types of spending, what revenues are collected, and how international donor assistance and other public resources are used. Access means they will be better positioned to participate in the hearings, contribute to how the country's resources are used, and hold the government accountable. Transparency is an important first step to holding government accountable for how they use the people's resources. It is against this backdrop that SEDOC developed the SNBTC project with the objective to compare the degree of budget transparency across states, promote international best practices with regards to budgeting and budget process in the states, and inspire and encourage the spirit of competitiveness amid states towards promoting budget transparency and government accountability. With the merits of fiscal prudence in mind, the fundamental question of what document the government should make available to the people to be open and expose secrecy in government accounting continues to arise. Sub-national budget documents deal with items and expenditures that are particularly visible and tangible documents for the citizens. Thus, transparency at the state level has the capacity to offer answers to basic concerns of what happened to the central government funds at the local level, and whether plans to carry out community development projects such as building schools, local roads, etc., were properly implemented. Recognizing the relevance of sub-national transparency, on availability of data on budget prudence, and knowing that the first steps towards pursuing open and transparent governance is through investigation and advocacy, SEDOC engaged both international and local partners in this project, the Nigerian State Budget Transparency Survey in the 36 states of Nigeria. The results of the 2022 edition were all gathered here to launch. The support and promotion of accountable government is the responsibility of all. I think that has been well said here by Mr. Onyepe. While the state governments are saddled with the responsibility of budget development, the citizens, legislators, auditor generals, accountant generals, civil society organizations, and the media have significant roles to play in ensuring that the must-haves are included in the budget, as well as determining budget implementation. Playing a major role in the accountability ecosystem means that all and sundry have access to the budget information. It is therefore noteworthy that all citizens have access to information on how state governments plan revenue, incur debt, and spend public resources essential in the financial programs of the state. I want to take this opportunity to express a profound gratitude to UK FCDO Nigeria for sponsoring this critical project since 2012. Can we give them a round of applause, please? Our special thanks go to the representative of FCDO Nigeria, Magdalene Lago, Team Lead, Governance and Stability Block, Matthew Ayibakoro, Governance Advisor, and Chris Okeke, Governance Team Lead, not forgetting Mr. Odumu, Ebegoyi, and other FCDO staff who were always ready to offer us much needed support and encouragement. We are very grateful and look forward to more collaboration with FCDO and other partners in the future. I'm also appreciative of the sacrifices and efforts of the 36 CSOs that painstakingly went through the arduous journey of conducting the survey by completing the questionnaires with the data obtained from the states and providing evidence for their responses. Worthy of note are the experiences of the supervisors and zonal coordinators who monitored and ensured that researchers complied with the guidelines and methodology, which is very important because we know in Nigeria we have the penchant for sidetracking things. So this is very highly commendable. Not forgetting the reviewers and the project coordinator who sometimes had to do the review's job before approval, collation, and analysis. And collation and analysis by SEDOC's consultants. We really have to, in a very special way, salute the project coordinator in the person of our very own engineer Ralph Ndigwe for his passion, steadfast commitment to the project's success. Can we give a round of applause? Thank you very much. Therefore, I share the glory of our success with all who worked tirelessly to make this project successful. I welcome you all again to this launch of the 2022 Nigerian State Budget Transparency Survey results with the hope that all of us seated here will join hands to achieve good governance for all Nigerians through open, transparent, accountable budget planning and implementation. I wish you all fruitful participation. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Lady Azinge. We'll move on as we call on the team lead, governance and stability block of the FCGO, Magdalene Lagu, for her goodwill message.
Please permit me to stand on the existing protocol. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you. So I arrived in Nigeria about 3 weeks ago only, and I'm here listening and learning and really spending time with you all, I hope, to listen and learn and understand more as I proceed. I'm excited that my first formal engagement is on an incredibly critical governance topic, which is budget transparency. Let me start by congratulating the Civil Resource Development and Documentation Centre. I'll say the centre from now on, otherwise I might get a mouthful, and its partners for consistently shining the light on transparency and accountability of subnational public finance management systems. The survey could not have come at a better time, really. Firstly, Nigerians recently elected their leaders at the federal and subnational level. Surveys like this will enable state governments to take stock of their public finance management system. Secondly, it presents an important opportunity for citizens to assess and engage with their state government performance on PFM and ensure that public resources are well utilized. Public access to government budget and expenditure is important to citizens. It ensures that public officials are accountable, and it strengthens the social contract between the people and their government. When citizens can access timely and accurate public information, it builds public trust in government. Where public information is inaccessible, you get the reverse, or is inaccurate, it creates space for abuse of power, impropriety and corruption. We know this. The panel laid it out a bit earlier. So combating corruption in the public sector, or to combat corruption in the public sector, is absolutely critical to look at budget transparency, oversight of the budget by the legislature and supreme audit institutions, and enable citizen participation throughout the budget process. It's absolutely key. The UK is pleased to have supported the Civil Resource Development and Documentation Centre in this incredibly important exercise. But publishing this survey is not enough. Citizens and civil society organisations must engage with government officials to ensure sustainability where progress has already been made, but also to strengthen systems where improvement is required. As states begin to form their cabinets and their agendas, integrating budget transparency is going to be absolutely pivotal. It's incredibly notable that many state governments have already started strengthening their budget process, either through the State Fiscal Transparency, Accountability and Sustainability, or technical support from the Nigerian Governors Forum. I'm learning all the different agencies. Or through development partners. And this is incredibly notable that this work is actually happening and is progressing well. So for over 20 years, the UK government has provided technical assistance on governance reform, including public financial management at the subnational level in Nigeria. We hope that state governments will continue on this path of reform. And this survey provides the opportunity for peer learning among states. Let me conclude by congratulating state governments for the progress made so far, and commend the Civil Resource Development and Documentation Centre for its commitment in this process, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Magdalene. Moving on now, we want to call on the representative of the EU. We want to call on Uzochukwu Alutu. Uzochukwu Alutu.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, my name is Uzochukwu Alutu, and I'm standing in for the head of cooperation of the European Union delegation to Nigeria and ECOWAS. So what you'll be hearing after now is no longer me talking, but Mr. Ruben, who is the head of cooperation at the EU. So the EU would like to extend our sincere congratulations and best wishes to SEDOC Nigeria on the launch of the 4th edition of the Subnational Budget Transparency Survey. We believe that this project is a significant step towards improving transparency and accountability in government budgeting and policy implementation across the 36 states of the Federation. We are confident that the publication of this report will contribute significantly to increasing the level of transparency and accountability in budgeting in the country. We also believe that it will encourage a culture of dialogue, collaboration, and partnership between citizens, civil society organizations, and government institutions. On our part, that's the EU, and in line with our new programming instrument, we have identified budget transparency and accountability as part of key priorities in Nigeria. And we are committed to supporting the government and civil society in their efforts to improve democracy, participatory governance, and accountability. The EU partnership in this area would seek to identify and promote good practices and mechanisms to strengthen budget transparency and accountability, while also empowering youth, women, and disabled persons to participate in decision-making. Finally, we commend SEDOC for its continued commitment to promoting and advocating for good governance in Nigeria, and we look forward to continuing to partner together to achieve this goal. Thank you very much.
And very soon we're going for our tea break. But before then, let's call on the co-chair non-state actors for OGP Secretariat, Obianulama Nobi Ayodele. Did I get it? Obianulama, I got it now. Obianulama Nama Obianunama. I like the name.
Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to stand on the already well-established protocol. I bring you greetings from the National Steering Committee of OGP Nigeria, as well as the entire OGP community. SEDOC is one of our members, and we are really excited to be here to support you through this launch. It is something that you've done over the years excellently well. And just to mention again that budget transparency is a cardinal focus of our National Action Plan, which we recently launched this year, our 3rd National Action Plan for OGP Nigeria. And it is our hope that a lot of the information, a lot of the findings and recommendations that have come out of this State Budget Transparency Index 2022 will go into implementing the work that we are doing to see how we can improve transparency and accountability in this sector, as well as how we can improve our fiscal responsiveness and responsibility in Nigeria. Thank you very much, and I wish us all very fruitful participation. And yes, it's Obialonamma. Fantastic. Thank you.
I told you I would get it. Thank you very much. I was just going to tell Engineer Ralph that there's really no subnational survey that we have had that we've not had a representative from the executive, especially a governor. I remember the last one, the deputy governor of Jigawa State came in. There was one even some past governors were here. I remember Babangida Aliyu was here one time. I remember the former governor of Cross River State was here one time for the panel. And so I was wondering why a governor was not here. But I'm told that Mr. Aminu Ringim is representing the Jigawa State governor, and he has a goodwill message. Please, a round of applause for him. You know, in Jigawa, the last government, the deputy governor was an accountant. The governor was an accountant. Is it the same thing now?
It's the same thing. Thank you so much. I want to inform you the deputy governor you are talking about, he's now the current governor. Yeah. Good morning all. I am delighted to be part of this meeting. As he said, our governor is willing to come to this meeting, but unfortunately due to some engagement, he could not be able to attend. So he asked me to represent him and also myself and the entire Jigawa team. This event is very critical in terms of the issue of budget transparency. It has been highlighted by all the speakers. Budget transparency is key because it is a process where you will understand that service delivery is effectively delivered to the citizens. That is the key. The representative of FCDO mentioned about the social contract, which is very critical, that the citizens must obey the leaders and agree that they are their leaders. And also the government or the governors must deliver service to the citizens. So this process is very critical in ensuring that services are delivered to the common man. So I really appreciate the effort of CDOC and also the support of FCDO in this process. It will really help us in the subnational government to understand that service delivery is very key. And following the rules and regulations in terms of public financial management is also very key in terms of service delivery. So I welcome everybody and I wish us a successful deliberation in our undertaking. Thank you so much.
Please extend our heartfelt appreciation to the governor. I remember that time he came, I didn't know he's now the governor. He was deputy governor then. Ladies and gentlemen, we're moving on. We'll now take a group photograph, then move over for tea break before we'll come back for the cocoa of the matter, the presentation. But first, could we have a group photograph? I think we can do it here. Engineer Ralph, we can do the group photograph here or outside. I think here will be better. Okay, so outside for everybody. But before we go for the group photograph, I would like to recognize all the researchers from all the states. Please, could you stand up for recognition that were involved in this SEDOC? Please, could you stand up for recognition? Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the great men and women that did this research, scholars that have done this research and come out with this survey. A round of applause. We'll recognize you again. This is part one. Thank you very much. You may be seated. The zonal coordinators. Okay, yes, the zonal coordinators. have it for the zonal coordinators. Please, could you stand up for recognition? All the zonal coordinators. The 6 zonal coordinators. That man is my friend there. Well, anyway, thank you very much and congratulations. Please, could we move out for the group photograph? Thank you.